Hello, and welcome to this season of Alter Eagle. We are starting season 1 with the topic of addiction in Butler County. Conversations on the physical side of addiction, trauma, the neuroscience, mental health, and stigma surrounding addiction. Experts, resources, and stories from people who have fought addiction head on. I am your host, Laura Krigo. Let's keep the conversation going. Now a word from our sponsor, BetterHelp. For a long time, I suffered with depression and anxiety. I had tried therapy before, but struggled finding a therapist I connected with until I found BetterHelp. That's why I am so excited to share BetterHelp's mission to make therapy more affordable and more accessible, because finding a therapist can be hard, especially when you're limited to the options in your area. BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easier because it's online. Remote therapy sessions, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days. It's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. Click the link in description and receive 10% off your first month of BetterHelp. And by clicking that link, you support this channel. Plus, you can easily switch to a new therapist at no additional cost without stressing about insurance, who's in your network, or anything like that. I was struggling for a long time, and BetterHelp was where I found my therapist, Whitney, who I still see weekly for almost 2 years now. So, if you're struggling like I was, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in description or go to betterhelp.com/alter eagle. That's betterhelp.com/alter eagle. There's no better time than now to start your mental health journey. Thank you again, BetterHelp, for supporting this channel. Hello, Alter Eagle listeners. This is your host, Laura Krigo. Starting today's episode on a different note. This season, while it has been well-informed and really therapeutic for a lot of my guests and for listeners alike, it's weighing pretty heavy on me hearing these stories and sitting down with the wonderful folks who are willing to come in and open themselves up, to be vulnerable and brave. And this week is nothing short of that. On September 14th, 2020, Sherry Jo Matt and Tom Bott received a call that no parent wants to receive. Their 21-year-old daughter, Siena, died of fentanyl poisoning in her family's home. Diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and bipolar disorder at the age of 12, Siena turned to drugs and alcohol to cope with her emotional pain. Two of the loveliest people I have had the pleasure of sitting down with, Sherry Jo and Tom, really opened themselves up in today's episode, and I just wanted to start with what I'm feeling when it comes to having these conversations and not having a personal experience with addiction. While I have known people who have suffered with addiction and are in long-term recovery, I am someone who has experienced mental health issues personally. It's something that I will share. And so perhaps that's why this episode hit me the way that it did. Knowing what it's like to be depressed and needing ways to cope with your depression. I am someone who really tries to meet people where they're at. And sometimes it's to my own detriment that I do that. But other times it pays off. I like to be a support system, be a sounding board, be that person who you can go to when you need to just vent. So many emotions in this episode, so much to share, so much to dig into. So I really implore all of you who are listening, take the time to listen to this episode in its entirety. If you're not able to listen to the whole episode at once, that's fine. Take a break. I do that a lot with podcasts, right? I start listening to something and it can be heavy, Or maybe I'm just on my way to work and I don't have time to finish it by the time I get to work. But I do really want to encourage all of you, listen to these episodes in their entirety. There is so much to dig into. And when we're sitting down and talking to these individuals, whether they be experts or those who are in long-term recovery who have suffered with this disease, with this battle of addiction, it connects us. Human connection is one of our biggest topics this season, along with mental health. Not feeling alone in your struggles, not feeling like an outcast. And what I learned from this episode especially was that was something Siena was really struggling with. So if you know someone who is struggling, if you know someone who has been in and out of rehab, or they have a family member who is struggling, do everything that you can to encourage them to try again. Give them hope. Give them the support that they deserve. We all deserve support. For sitting down, for listening to this episode today, I just want to say thank you. I know I sound like I'm doing something a little different here because I myself am feeling I'm feeling connected to everything that's going on because it's going on in our community, in our town. Change the way that you look at people when you see them on the street. Change the way that you interact with them, whether it's a smile or hello. You are not obligated to do anything, but just those two acts right there, a smile, a hello, can change someone's entire perspective on themselves to be seen. So, something to think about, but please do be aware this episode, with these two parents, these two lovely individuals who are making a difference. Right away, Sherry Jo knew that they had to start this project. Founders of Stop The Judgement, a brave and selfless act to be a support, to continue to open this wound that, to be perfectly honest, grief is a tough beast. It's one of those things that ebbs and flows. It's not linear. I have struggled with my own grief. And if anyone out there is struggling, know that you're not alone in your grief, in your sadness, and that you are here for a reason. So as we get into this episode, just be open to everything that you're hearing. And when it comes to our interactions, we really can be the change. We can change the way that we look at individuals who are struggling, who are homeless, who are struggling with substance abuse. We can change the way that we refer to them, the words that we use. So if you're listening, thank you for listening. I'm going to stop rambling now and we're going to get to our episode. All right, welcome. So today, episode 8, I'm sitting down with Sherry Jo and Tom. Welcome. Everything changed in 2020. It was in composing her 21-year-old daughter Siena's obituary mere hours after her death from a fentanyl poisoning in their family home that Sherry Jo Matt first raised her voice to stop the judgment that surrounds mental health and substance use disorders. Since that devastating day in 2020, Sherry Jo has continued to use her voice to educate, advocate, and illuminate the relentless battle many individuals and families are fighting every day. Sitting here with me today are Sherry Jo and Tom. So let's first start. I would like both of you just to tell me a little bit more about yourselves and who you are.
Well, my name is Tom Bott, and my daughter Siena. Our family, in addition to Siena, she was the oldest. We have a son, Dylan. He is currently a freshman in college in New York City. He's 3 years younger than Siena. So we had the two children, and Siena did start to struggle with mental health and substance use issues right around puberty, probably, 13, 14 years old. And the thing that, looking back, I think like every parent, I'll forever wonder what I could have done differently to have a different outcome as things happen. But also as a parent, Sherry and I, we didn't always approach things the same way, but we both did it out of love for Siena. I mean, it was unconditional love. But unfortunately, we're here today speaking with you about this very, very sad, but it's a topic that's very relevant, and something that a lot of other people are dealing with as well.
Of course, a lot of parents out there who don't know what to do, right? What you are doing, you are sort of guiding them, yes, in this. So Sherry.
Well, Tom and I have been married almost 32 years, so we had Siena, and we were absolutely thrilled to be pregnant with her. And I can honestly say, not once when I was pregnant, I ever thought I'd raise a child with substance use and mental health. But Siena had borderline personality and bipolar, and she had substance use disorder. I've been telling people I have the highs of the highs in parenting. Dylan goes to school at Columbia, New York, and Siena's in heaven. Couldn't be much of a further apart on the parenting spectrum.
Yeah.
But Siena definitely was loved. She was wanted. Siena never raised her hand in kindergarten and said, hey, when I grow up, I want to have substance use and mental health disorders. And I want to have behavior so erratic, no one knows what's happening. And it was really hard to decide whether it was a phase, whether it was teenager stuff, whether it was social media, the people she was hanging out with. Although most of her life she had really good friends, it was towards the end that they were definitely questionable, and I refer to them as the horrible deplorables. Siena was loved and wanted.
And that's probably the hardest part of this whole conversation, right? Is that you did everything. Do you realize that? I mean, do you feel that you did everything? And I don't have children. I've always wanted children. That's a different conversation. But with my mother, a lot of times I know that a lot of her reactions or advice on things is just because she worries, right? And because she loves me. And even when things are going good. So that's what you do. I'm hoping that you have found peace knowing that you did everything that you could do. And when we talk about addiction and underlying mental health issues, right? That even if you know that someone could be predisposed to a mental health issue, it doesn't mean they're going to have it. But those drugs exacerbate the mental health. And then that's why a lot of people become addicted, because it's sort of firing these neurons in their brain and these, happy endorphins. And when they're not doing the drugs, then the mental health is coming. It's literally like a balancing act. And so to get a handle on that, everyone's journey is different. I'm learning. There are people who find that AA works for them. There are people who find that therapy works for them. There are people that have to go to rehab multiple times. You go out and you talk a lot. I mean, this is your life.
It's part of our life. It's nothing we planned on doing. I can assure you of that. But we never want another family to feel the pain that we have. Siena had, like I said, she had mental health issues and substance use disorder, and she self-medicated. She therefore, because the drugs are so strong on the streets right now, she became addicted to them. Mm-hmm. And it was such a change in her personality, change in her body shape, She was a gorgeous girl. She didn't look like me. She looked like my sister-in-law, quite honestly. But she was gorgeous inside and out. She would have done anything for anybody. And the horrible deplorables took advantage of that. Mm-hmm. They took advantage of her being incredibly bright, of her coming from an affluent family. At one point, she had almost $200,000 worth of car loans that she never once drove those cars. She co-signed for other people. That was addiction. Yeah, because she had an American Express card attached to mine, so she had really good credit because I always pay off my cards in full. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, I was trying to establish credit for her. And had she not had substance use and mental health disorders, it would have worked out really well. But because she had the people she was hanging out with took advantage of her and took advantage of the credit that I had established for her. So there's a lot of wonky behavior when you have addiction issues and mental health. And it's not it's not two train tracks. On one side is mental health, on the other is substance use.
Mm-mm.
It's more like the DNA symbol, which I wish I knew what it was called, but it's a woven tapestry of mental health and substance use disorder.
Yeah, that's a really great analogy. I mean, that's something that did come up with Dr. Brophy, how a lot of times in years ago, and I think we're learning now that they are connected.
Oh, absolutely.
That they're connected. A lot of times someone would go and they'd get sent to a mental health professional. Oh, you have bipolar, or you have this or that. And sometimes they weren't even off the drugs long enough to really be diagnosed properly.
Yeah.
And then, the mental health doctor's like, oh, well, you have this, and sending them to someone else. No, these are connected. That's kind of what we're talking about here, that's underlying issue. And mental health in itself is such a challenge. I mean, I know a lot of people in my life who have struggled with mental health. And I didn't know any of them to have a substance use disorder. But in this learning now about all of this and all the things I'm learning, I feel like my brain's just like, oh, wow, there's so many layers to this. And again, going back to that, as a parent, no matter what, you're going to love your child, right? You're going to look out for your child. You're going to do whatever you can to help them. And that also is probably, unfortunately, what surrounded her with those types of people that didn't have that. And they can't differentiate that their life is different, right? There are a lot of people out there that compare, and a lot of people who...
I do think, though, with Siena, the name of our foundation, Stop The Judgement Project, it was a name that I actually came up with, and it was reflective of how we judged our daughter. Unfortunately, and that's a regret that I know I'll take to my grave. Just creating that shame, like, hey, we didn't raise you this way. And I think it was because of that. Most people just, human nature, you try to improve your your status in life, right? She was the other way. It was like a race to the bottom. And I think she found a group of friends that she didn't feel judged. Or didn't feel shamed by.
Wow.
And unfortunately, it was these, this group of people that took advantage of her. Because one thing about Siena is, to the end there, notwithstanding all of her issues, she had the kindest soul. She was just a very, very, kind of generous person.
She really was.
Talk about her a little bit more in the sense of what you're comfortable with, who she was before this.
Before the drugs and before the horrible deplorables, Siena was she was kind right until the very end, and she would have done anything for anybody. She was as beautiful inside as she was outside. And I know every parent says that about their kids, but she truly had a very special heart. And her true friends would agree with that, and her family. Siena was incredibly talented. She had piano lessons when she was a kid. She taught herself how to play piano. Baron Batch is a former Pittsburgh Steeler and local artist in Pittsburgh. He designed the logo. Siena would go over and paint with him, and he's a very dear family friend. So she was incredibly artistic and talented musically, and very, very bright. Like, she was doing her friend's college accounting classes, the homework for her class, even though she had never taken an accounting class, and the girl was getting all A's. She could do anyone's calculus homework and get A's on. Like, she was just incredibly bright, but she was kind. There was one time she ran in the house, and I was like, Siena, is everything okay? And she's like, Mom, I just heard a new Mac Miller song. I've got to sit down and play it. So she sat down at the piano, and in 20 or 30 minutes, she had that memorized. And other than the piano being out of tune, it was well done.
Mike Kelly said that when I sat down with him, and he talked about addiction, mental health, overdose. There's so much loss of potential. Mm-hmm. And that's probably the hardest part, right?
Yeah.
That's where a lot of your pain comes from, because a lot of people say that how do we get through to this person that they are valued, right? That they are loved, that they are necessary, that they are needed, because that's what ends up happening with mental health, especially when you are talking about someone who probably got really depressed. And I can relate to that. I've been there. So it's one of those situations where, you just feel so low. And it is just a matter of, no matter what anyone says to you, you know that this is going to make me feel better. If I do this thing that makes me happy and makes me feel like I'm okay, then everything's going to be okay. And most people, when they first start doing drugs, that's what happens, right? They feel good. It works. They're like, all right, this works. I can do this. But then the drug really starts to take over. And then that's where everything shifts. And at that point, it's too late.
Yeah.
You had brought up, how this was something that you knew right away. But another thing you brought up to me was starting this foundation. But one of the things you also were really adamant about was putting in her obituary how she died. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure.
Yeah.
We found out we were 4 hours away. We had gone on a hiking vacation. And so when we found out the Siena had passed, we were driving back 4 hours. I have no idea how my husband kept the car in the lanes. I have absolutely no idea to this day. But I was making phone calls to bring her brother back from Boston because he was playing junior hockey in Boston. I had to call the hockey mom and go to the hotel because it was COVID, to get him out of the hotel to someplace private where I could tell him his sister had passed away. It was such a hard phone call. And I just told Tom on the ride home from Ohio that we are going to be honest in this obituary. We can't make a difference if we don't be honest, if we're not honest in the obituary. If we're honest, then people will know. And I wasn't going to hide because we had isolated long before COVID, because when you love somebody with mental health and substance use disorder, you isolate anyhow because you don't have a perfect kid. And you're sitting with friends that are like talking about how great their kids are and the amazing things you're doing or they're doing. And you're sitting there going, I have a kid that has addiction issues. I have a kid that has such erratic behavior. I have no idea if I'm coming or going or how I'll ever save her. And so on the ride home, knowing that my daughter was dead, I told Tom, we are being honest in her obituary. We are going to be honest. And so that night we went home. I folded Siena's clothes because I saw her laundry basket by the laundry. And we waited for the detectives to come back. I took a shower and I sat down at 4 a.m. and I wrote the most honest obituary I could think of at the time. And I did have a friend that wanted to edit it and thought I was in shock, which I was, but I wasn't so much in shock that I absolutely wanted that obituary. And I think any parent experiencing what we experienced, if they're honest in their obituary with their child, because they're still here long after their kids are gone, it makes a difference when you go out in public. It makes a difference when you go to the grocery stores or the restaurants or you see friends. And believe it or not, it's actually saved our family in many ways, being honest, because we don't have to go through the story a million times about how they died. Because let's face it, as a society, when you see a teeny tiny obituary, Siena Bott 21 unexpectedly died. Well, I'm sorry, that's total BS because she did unexpectedly die, but she didn't get unexpectedly died by a bus or falling out of the sky with a plane or something. She died because of the addiction to drugs, and the drugs killed her. Mm-hmm. And that's what I wanted to be honest about. And since we've been so honest, it has saved us many times because we don't have to rehash it. We can hold our heads up high. We were good parents. We truly tried our best. And Siena had access to any and everything she wanted. She refused. And she said she didn't want to go to rehab because she didn't want to be judged as a drug addict.
Nor did she want her family to be labeled
judged
as having a daughter as an addict.
So in part, that's also one of the reasons we named the foundation Stop the Judgement Project. Project meaning it's going to go on for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, Laura.
Nope.
Just to complete the thought, as far as being honest in the obituary, but for that, we would not have been able to start the foundation either, because that was the whole point. I mean, how would you, had we not said anything, then you come up with the foundation, it would have been a bit awkward. So it really was a springboard, for the foundation to start.
And we hid in pain long enough because we isolated, knowing that, like, we didn't take social engagements. We didn't go out to events. We kind of hid from the whole fact that our daughter had addiction. we hid it from our friends. My own mother, one of the hardest, second call from calling her brother was calling my mother and telling my mother that her granddaughter had passed away. And she never knew Siena had addiction until she passed at 21.
So there were a lot of conversations you were having right from the get.
Yeah.
Immediately. But it was almost as if you knew. And I can understand that feeling. It's a very powerful feeling where you're like, no, this is what I'm doing. I have to do this. I just know. And trusting that is really powerful. A lot of people don't know how to take that next step. You were just continuing to take steps. There is a fear, right? If you don't continue to move forward, some people sit in grief for a while, but then some people sit in it and they don't get out of it.
They never get out of it.
They never get out of it. They never get up. They never move forward. I, lost my dad at a young age. I was 14, and for someone who at 14, yeah, it was young. And I still think of people who handle that so much differently than I do. I used to go into, I'm sure the anniversary, right? That first year is the worst.
It's the second, actually.
Okay.
The first year, you're still in shock.
Okay.
The second year, the reality, she's not on vacation. She didn't sign up for the military. She's not on, an extended leave of any kind. She's never coming back. And the second year for me and other moms I've spoken to has been the hardest because it's the reality that forever is a really, really long time. And forever, she's never running through that door again.
Are you someone, I'm going to ask you something. Do you believe like in signs? Do you believe
Always.
So what is, because for my grandmother, it's a cardinal, right? Mm-hmm. And like the minute I found out she had passed away, I walked outside and literally 2 cardinals came and landed and I was like, that's her and my grandpa. Like they're reunited. And it just was this moment of like, oh, wow. And I believe in that. What's her sign?
I believe in that too. In fact, this will sound really weird to some of your listeners, but in some ways I feel closer to Siena in death than I did her last couple of years on earth, because I didn't know who she was with the drugs. They completely changed her mental thinking. They completely shifted the shape of her body and her face. And I didn't know who I was talking to. I could sit across from her and she could lie to me just like she was up for an Oscar nomination, because people that use drugs and people with mental health can lie to you and you walk away, go, my God, I'm crazy. I know she's lying to me, but it sounded so real and so authentic that I'm the crazy one. But the signs I see from Siena, I see these orbs, and I have a green orb that follows me in almost every photo or video taken. And a lot of times that orb is surrounded with a purple orb for Siena. And then I have these videos, and I wish I knew somebody that could analyze these videos, but a week after Siena passed, September 14th, 2020, and my birthday, Siena's birthday was July 21st, and mine was September 21st. So a week after she passed was my birthday. But on my birthday, some of Siena's true friends coordinated a balloon launch, and there's this, I'll show it to you, but there's these orbs, a orb that flies around, and it's like it's reading all of the messages on the balloons. Wow. And then there's this thing that like opens and closes almost like a clamshell in the sky of 2 videos that were taken. And I've never seen anything like the clamshell thing going in and out, but it's super, super cool. And I see feathers all the time. I was just in New York City. I saw a little feather. I see money on the ground. I know it's Siena. And of course, I see cardinals. In fact, today I saw 2 cardinals on my way to get my hair done. Like she's with me all the time. And I truly feel closer to her in death because I can talk to her now. Yeah. And she's not talking back with some crazy randomness that makes me feel like I'm crazy.
Well, she was also, her energy, her aura, her spirit was clouded by all of that. Mm-hmm. That's what happens, right? I mean, it's, they talk about alcohol as a suppressant and, the drugs, like they're masking things. They're covering things up. So that's what was happening. She was being covered up. Mm-hmm. Her spirit was being covered up. And even though I know that you would say you would do anything if you could have her here, right?
Absolutely.
In a good way, in a healthy way, watching her live her life and move forward. But now I've done that, you just say, well, but that's not the way that it is. So how do I make this situation? Like, how do I get through this? And how do I continue to keep her alive, right? Keeping her spirit alive. That's what you're both doing. You are. I mean, you are keeping her alive in a way. And I hope that's not disrespectful to say that that's what you're doing. And it's really powerful. And I know that there's a lot of parents out there who are really going to feel something from this, or my hope is that people reach out to you, right? And that they're finding hope in their journey, or even if their children are still here and they're in that and they're like, okay, so what do I do, right? You say, that's one of your quotes, is that we hope to prevent other parents and families from having to experience the pain that is in our hearts every time we open our eyes.
Yeah, I will share with your audience, after Siena passed and Sherry wanted to start this foundation, I was against it because even today it's a double-edged sword, right? All the good that we may do, it's never going to bring Siena back, but it is the right thing to do. But the pain was so raw. You know, my position was, I'm not ready for this. And Sherry said, no, we're going to move forward. And to her credit, she pushed forward. It was with or without you, I'm doing this. And, through the last couple of years, and as I got more involved with the foundation, it really did become therapeutic for me. And I think it helped us with our marriage. I mean, with any family, when you lose a child, the first thing you do is the parents blame each other. And I know the divorce rate for parents that have lost a child, I think is north of 50%, if I'm not mistaken. And I'd be lying if I didn't say that, there were times that we came close to saying, look, this, time to move on. But thank God we persevered. And I do think the foundation allowed us to heal. And that's the other thing too, is everybody's journey is different. Even husband and wife, like Sherry's the only person, and in our son, there's the three of us, we share this loss, but each of us has a different journey. And, there were times that Sherry would say like, oh, you should do this. And I'd say, look, with all due respect, I'm glad that makes you feel better. It doesn't help me, but there were other things that would help me. And we're at the point now that we do respect that and say, that's great. I mean, that's your journey.
Wow.
And that's how you're going to heal. And the same thing with our son, what helps him. So but the foundation, as much as I was against it initially, I am so happy that we have that, and that Sherry really pushed forward on that, and where we're at today.
So what was that like when you first put it out there that you were doing this, that this is what you were doing? What was your first initial, like, did you have an event? Did you just start the website? What was the first thing that sort of came from it?
Well, I have a pretty strong background in fundraising and nonprofits and event planning. So it's almost like Siena left knowing that I was going to take action, because there's a lot of things a lot of people can say about me, but I'm a doer and I will get things done. If I commit to it, watch out, at all costs, this is happening. So a lot of this has happened so organically because we were so honest in the obituary. People came to us, like one of the very first events. We didn't have a logo. We weren't a 501c3. People are like, you've got a foundation. You're going to make this thing happen. We believe in you because you're you and you're us, Tom and I. We believe in you. So somebody came to us and said, hey, we want to do a chicken dinner for you. So it was COVID. So it was a drive-through chicken dinner. People had pre-ordered and we had some available on spot, but we just had a bucket collecting money. Our next fundraiser was, and I know this is ironic for foundation, but especially with addiction, but we have access to a beer distributor that's willing to be very, very generous. And again, it was COVID, so we were limited on what we could do, but we had like a concert and a beer event. So it was a beer tasting with a concert. And so we would deliver 6 packs of beer for the tasting. And the 6-pack was for 2 people that you could taste. And we had glasses and snacks and everything. So we had that. Then we had a comedy night. Everything has happened so organically that we just keep moving forward. And I'm very, very proud of what we're doing.
You should be. Yes.
We did a fundraiser at our house, and it was actually in conjunction with Sherry's birthday. And that was a huge success. We had, I think, about 110 people. We had a live band there. So that was a success. And the next big thing for us is we are going to be part of the Highmark Walk. And that's coming up in June, and we'll start to advertise that. But I do think I'm very spiritual, and I do think that there has definitely been, divine intervention, a lot of things that have happened for us and for this foundation. And I think, Siena's certainly there, has her hand in it. Because really things have happened. We've been at events where we've had a table and other folks that have, that have a foundation that have, that have lost a child or whatever. They are shocked at how, advanced we are, if you will, or knowing how young our foundation is. It's like, my God, we just can't believe that you're where you're at in such a short period of time. But to Sherry's credit, she really does have that skill set, but more importantly, that drive and that determination. But I do think that there has been, divine intervention in the process as well.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It's sort of this, it's grief is so, I don't know. I don't even know how to say.
Personal.
Yeah, it's because I'm one of those people that I'm like, we are all literally on our own journey, our own path. It's all so different, but we are connected in so many ways. And it's that you've got to go through to get out, right?
I've described certainly my grief process. The way I've described it is if anyone's ever been pregnant, and certainly the moms out there will appreciate this, I hope. But when you get pregnant, your pregnancy is different than anybody else's. You can have more than one kid, and each pregnancy is different. Each delivery is different, and each person experiencing grief, we don't hold a monopoly on losing a child. We don't hold a monopoly on, if you've lost a pet, you're in grief. If you've lost a child, you're in grief. If you've lost parents or siblings or whatever, you're in grief. We don't hold a monopoly on that pain. We hold a monopoly on losing a child compared to losing a pet, which I know people think of as children. I respect that. But unless you've delivered that child, it is completely different. But it doesn't weigh more than anyone else's grief or pain. But it is so individualized. Even my husband, son, and I, the three of us, experience completely different on the pain. But the thread is the same. We all love Siena, and we all miss her. And for any of your listeners that have lost a child, I respect you. I see you. And I think because we were so honest and open in the obituary, people see us and they come to us and they tell us how much they're struggling with their children or how much pain they're in and how much they wish they had been honest in the obituary instead of just a couple of sentences. Because as a society in 2024, we're going to an overdose or to a suicide with 3 or 4 sentences anyhow. So you might just as well be honest because people are coming to their own conclusions without you being honest.
That is a huge topic that has also come up this season, that we're not having the conversations. We're not having the hard conversations. We need to be talking to our children. If there is underlying mental health in a family history, explaining what that is to them, telling them like, hey, not to scare you, just to tell you, just to give you information, right? Knowledge is power. Information is power. Having these conversations. I have met so many people, and I'm always amazed when I hear it, but I've met so many people who make the choice not to drink because they're like, oh, well, my father was an alcoholic. So I've just decided that I'm just not going to drink because I feel that I'm predisposed to that. And I want to give myself a chance just to be able to do that. Right. Especially it's very impressive, especially in today's society with people in their 20s, teenagers. I have no idea with social media. I don't know how parents do it now with the social media and the phones and all of the things that they now have. Here's another thing that's going to make it even harder. We're just going to keep adding elements to the fact that life is already hard, but the hard is kind of what gets us where we're going, right? It makes us strong. But sometimes it's not enough to tell someone that to get them through something. And that's another part of this whole stigma and stopping the judgment. It's not about just telling someone, well, hey, just buck up, just get out there and stop doing it. That used to be the way, right? That used to be the way. But what you are doing is you're creating these conversations where like, we have to stop being so judgmental because no one is immune to this.
No one.
It's not a lifestyle that anyone would choose. Addiction is so insidious, and Dr. Brophy would I know was shared with this audience that it just takes over the brain, right? And it rewires everything. But there was no way that just having witnessed firsthand, what my daughter or our daughter went through, that would not be something that she or anyone would want to choose that lifestyle in what she experienced. But it's the addiction that you are just willing to put your life at risk even to support the disorder. So it's very insidious.
I noticed on your website you brought up the show Euphoria.
Yeah.
On HBO, and I watched that. I was very impressed by the acting.
Yes.
By the actors, by the portrayal, and seeing these kids and knowing, well, that's what's going on. But what's your take on that, and what that sort of is putting out to young people?
I can go both ways on Euphoria. I've only watched 2 seasons, and I watched it because the Sun News out of the UK asked me to. It was their US edition. But they asked me if I would be comfortable watching Euphoria and giving my feedback prior to the end of the 2nd season. And I watched it. I cried pretty much through the whole thing because that was my life. Like watching my daughter spin down the drain like that. I couldn't stop her from circling the drain. And every time she dropped another level, the quality of her friends dropped another level. And I was sinking with her and circling with her. But there was one line in the Euphoria where the mother finds her daughter's drugs. I found Siena's drugs. I flushed Siena's drugs. The mother flushed the daughter's drugs. And the daughter told the mother, I know you hate me because I hate myself. And Siena told me the exact same words. And I never hated my daughter. To the contrary, I love my daughter very much. But I certainly hated her actions through the drugs and the mental health because I didn't understand them. I kept saying, Siena, I don't understand. You're not raised like this. You come from an affluent family that we can provide anything for you. Please go to rehab. Please stop hanging with these people. Please, like her car looked like it was, on some racetracks all smashed up and everything because she was constantly running into things or backing into things or whatever. It was just in horrible shape. And nobody would wish for this lifestyle. No one. She had clothes that were lost and or stolen. She lost and or sold items that were given to her. And she would feel always remorseful for it, but she couldn't stop herself from selling what she could buy drugs with,
And there is that saying that nobody's, more tough on an addict than
the addict themselves. Yeah. Yes.
And it's true. I mean, Siena, it became a self-hatred. And then it's that just then, causes her to want to numb the pain even more. And then the addiction goes deeper. It's a vicious cycle, but that's where, I think, unfortunately, we don't have as parents that have lost a child to a drug overdose, I wish I had the something magical I could say to your listeners to say this is do this or do that. The best I can say is it really is our foundation is if it's to love your child unconditionally. You can set boundaries, but it's to let them know that no matter what, you love them and you're not ashamed of them because you've just got to know that they're more ashamed of themselves than you could ever be.
Wow, you are the most remarkable people I think I have ever met when it comes to a situation like this. I'm sorry. I hope that doesn't I'm feeling like I knew it was going to be really hard. I can feel what you're feeling without saying it. You can hear it in your voice. I don't think that we ever fully heal from something like this.
No, there'll forever be a hole in our hearts. There will forever be a loss. There will forever be, loss on all the holidays. No grandchildren, no weddings, no college graduations, no anything. But with Siena being gone, we also don't have the pain of wondering where she is and who she's hanging with and what drugs she is and who's harming her and who's taking advantage of her. One of the guys that she dated at the end supposedly poured gas on her and pulled her down the stairs. She had the bruises to prove it, and she had other people saying that it happened. Siena admitted it happened. So I'm assuming this person that I refer to as Del Ghetto knows exactly what he did, and those worries we don't have.
Yeah.
Could she have stayed in society's box? I don't know. I honestly don't know.
Yeah, you're going to have both sides of that, right?
Yeah.
You're going to have what could have been good and bad because of where she was at. What do you say to parents who come to you, maybe with a child who is currently in this situation of using, abusing, lying, stealing, selling whatever they can? What do you say?
That's the hardest thing. I'm a happy helper by nature. And if I know the secret to anything, I'm going to share it with you. As far as, like this is going to help your kid 100%. Like I can teach you how to make a souffle and not have it drop. I can get you to Italy to take cooking classes. I can get you the fastest and the shortest, the most scenic to Florida if you want to go there. I cannot, even with this horrific experience that we have, I cannot tell you how to 100% save your child. And that is the most painful thing, that it's like, I have the answer. Okay, my child is going to be the last ever to die from this insidious disease that's out there. But I can't do that because there are no answers ever. Like you said earlier, AA is enough for some people. Just saying, hey, I'm not going to drink is enough for some people. And some people going to rehab once. We have a board member and I love her so much. She went to rehab once and she's been clean for 6 years. That's not the norm, but I am so proud of her. And all I can say to parents is please don't give up on your child, because your child hasn't given up on themselves. I mean, they keep waking up every day. Yes, they might be searching for drugs, but if you keep getting them, it's like the compound effect. Sometimes it's like, oh my God, how many times do they have to go to rehab? Keep them going. They're still alive. Don't give up on your child because they are still alive.
Yeah.
There's still hope to help them.
Well, you are helping by saying that, right? Sometimes people need to hear that. There's so many times that people get to a point where they're like, they just throw their hands up in the air, right? And you hear it. You hear people getting to that point of a breaking point where they just can't continue. So by you doing that, you are helping people.
Yeah.
Right? You're being honest. Like you don't have the answer. We don't have the answer. If there was a test we could do, right? And say, okay, well, this person, this is what's going to help them because of this and because of what's going on in their body. They need to do rehab and then this, and then you hear of people who methadone saved their life.
Yeah.
And there's people that are like, methadone's bad. It's like, but there are people that are still alive and they're in recovery because of methadone. So how can we say that?
Yeah.
You don't know until you try. So it's really a matter of like, you've just got to keep plowing away at it. I mean, they have the show on TV. I'm sure you're very familiar with Intervention. Have you ever watched that show?
I have not.
So Intervention, that's what it is. It's stories of, and a lot of these people, it's to the point where like they're going to die if they continue down this path. And the families they don't know what else to do. It's basically, they have an intervention and they all bring them into a room with a therapist. And a lot of those stories, you'll see it's like, they went to rehab for 4 months, they stayed sober, and then they went back to using again. Or they ended up here, or they ended up there. And they're all different. Every story is different.
Every single one. And On average, I think a person goes to rehab 6 times before, and again, it's the compounding effect. You take a little each time, a little each time,
Mm-hmm.
and then if you're lucky, you can kick this thing. You really can, but you need the love and the support of families. And I would say to anybody listening to this and any parent looking for advice, you need to do what you are comfortable with. If it's tough love and you kick your kid out of the house, or
Mm-hmm.
if it's hard love and you wrap your arms in them and say, you know what, I love you. I'm walking this journey with you. You need to live with what is right for you.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell anybody, nor will I tell anyone, kick them out. It's the absolute right thing to do. I would never, ever tell a parent that. I would also never tell a parent to not stop hugging your child and loving on your child, because they need the love. They need the support. They don't want to be the person that they've become. And we've all gone through phases in our life. It's like when we look back and reflect, it's like, ooh, that wasn't the best side of me.
So I'd like to share just a couple of thoughts with your listeners, Laura. As a parent in having experienced this with Siena, it's easy to feel, I guess, it was easy to take her actions personal, like, she's doing this to hurt us. And that wasn't the case at all. And I think as a parent, if you can try to sift through that and realize that this is the addiction, right? And that may be a consequence of the addiction. But I said something earlier in this podcast, it was unconditional love with boundaries. So by all means, you can set boundaries, but I think you have to, you want to let your child know that you do love them and you support them and you're there for them no matter what. And again, you can set boundaries to say, look, that doesn't mean that, you can and cannot do this. But I think that's something, there's no way to tell whether Siena would have had a different result, but my wife and I could have done a better job on that front for sure. And that is one of the regrets that we have and we'll always have, right? Because we can't go back and do it over again. But I agree with Sherry Joe. I think it is. It's just continuing to show up and to be there, and don't give up on your children, as painful as it is. Because while they're still alive, there's always a chance.
So Siena's this is how insidious this affects families. Siena's last tattoo that she posted on social media today, tattoo today for my mom with the broken heart emoji. Addiction is a family disease one person may use, but the whole family suffers. That was her last tattoo.
So she knew that. She knew the pain that she brought to our family.
Wow.
And that just added to her pain.
This is the only disease, substance use and mental health are the only disease states that you go to jail for. Because as you said earlier, nobody wishes to have this. Well, guess what? Nobody wishes to have cancer or heart disease or diabetes, but they don't go to jail for that. I remember when I was a kid, somebody had cancer, one of our neighbors. And as a kid, I was told not to go over and bother her because it was her fault she had cancer. And the American heart disease, well, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And we look back now at the people with cancer, because they wouldn't tell. People with cancer wouldn't tell they had cancer because they didn't want to be judged. And because there was a huge stigma around cancer years ago, decades ago.
Yeah.
But the American Cancer Society did a campaign where they got the news out. And now if somebody comes up to you and says they have cancer, the meal trains come out, the hugs, the love, the rides to chemo and radiation come out. My girlfriend just passed from cancer. We were cleaning her house and cleaning her salon, and we were all together helping her. In my lifetime, I would love to see people come together and go, how can we help somebody with mental health? As Dr. Brophy said, he thinks generations or decades from now, we're going to laugh at how ridiculous we treated people that are on the streets because of drugs and mental health. They're not there because they want to be. I can assure anybody out there, they are not there because they want to be.
And I think it's, the perception is if you looked at mental health or substance use disorders as the diseases they are, that's where you'd start to, society would start to treat people differently. But when they look at it from the perspective of this is their choice, and they're almost like dirty for doing that, that's horrible. And that's really what our mission is about, is to try to socialize that message. And I think the more people talk about it, the more that message is going to get out. Personally, what I found is if I'm at a party or I'm at some event or even with some friends, if I start sharing with them Siena and some of the stuff that we're talking about today, it's amazing. Everybody, if there's 10 people at that circle, everybody knows somebody either in their family, friends, whatever, that's got mental health or substance use disorder, and then they start to open up. And I think that's what we have to do is, it shouldn't be taboo to talk about this stuff. And unfortunately, it still is. And this is going to be a long, long process, but you have to start somewhere. And that really is what we're about, is to really try to get that message out. But I do think if people looked at this as the diseases that they are, they would start to treat people differently.
We want to change the landscape of how people interact and think and treat those with substance use disorder and mental health issues, because it has to stop. I'm angry enough to take on the cartel. I don't have the skill set. I'm not real happy with our government and how they've dropped so many balls, and it goes back decades. Don't get upset, people. This is not about politics. It's not about the current or the last. It is about every chance the United States government has had since the 30s and 40s. Every Y in the road, they've chosen the wrong path. There's so many other countries out there that have done such a better job handling the drug crisis than we have. Portugal. Do you want to talk about Portugal?
Yeah. So Portugal, the program that they have is, first of all, here in the United States, rehab is generally 30 days. And Dr. Brophy will share that you have to have at least 90 days before you're going to see.
Not enough.
Not enough, right. So Portugal, it's 18 months that you're in a rehabilitation facility, fully paid for by the government. And then after you're through with rehab, and I think this is significant, you mentioned earlier, Laura, that if you do go to rehab, you're labeled an addict and then try to find a job, right? There's that stigma. Well, in Portugal, they put, after you've completed the rehab, you're given a job, and it's a very good job, highly respected. That's another 18 months. And the thought there is that you can then, you've had a chance to prove yourself. The expectation is that company's going to hire you full time, or at least then you've established to say, look, I've worked for 18 months. But I think the two is just brilliant that they put those two together, because that is a problem too. And I think that was where Siena, she didn't want to be labeled the addict because she knew the stigma that came with that.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, when I talk about this with people and I hear the things that I hear, like that there's another country out there that is able to provide because they want it to change.
Yeah.
They don't want it to stay the way that it is. And I'm so confused between the pharmaceutical companies. I'm going to say it. The pharmaceutical companies, the insurance companies. Insurance companies, if someone even has insurance, okay, let's say they have a job or they have an ability to pay for health insurance, which in our country is very expensive because I've had to self-pay.
It's ridiculous.
It's insane how much it is just a month for just me. Imagine if I was a single parent with 2 kids, or I had a husband and kids, and we had to pay for insurance, how much it would cost just to stay healthy.
Yeah.
So it's why is it that we can't get it together? 30 days. I mean, what is that? You can't even create a habit in 30 days. It's actually proven that, actually tested this theory. It's 6 to 7 weeks to like really create a habit.
People still don't view they still view addiction as a choice and not a disease. Because if somebody had cancer, they don't even ask that question, right? But you're right. A lease application, job application, have you, they talk about, have you ever been convicted? Have any felonies? They also ask about, have you been in rehab facilities? I mean, they shouldn't be able to pull that information out because they're not asking, have you ever had cancer? Have you ever had a heart disease? But so that really, in my opinion, is I think that's the impediment. And until society, and maybe we start with government, until they embrace the fact that this is a disease. And I think we've got experts out there. Dr. Brophy would be one of them that would say, yes, addiction is a disease and, mental health. So, but it's, unfortunately, that's not where we're at right now. And I think those are the negative consequences associated with it.
I also think corporations and anybody searching for an applicant need to be a lot more compassionate for those coming out of rehab, for those that they're already struggling with addiction. And every single day, try leaving your phone at home for a day and seeing if you miss it. Every single day is like leaving your phone at home for these people, because every single day they're like, oh my God, where's my drugs? It's what they've been using. And to fight that every single day, come on, people, let's applaud these people that are trying, that have gone to 30 days and 60 days and 90 days and are clean for 5, 6, 10, 20 years, whatever. They struggle every single day not wanting to use again, alcohol, drugs, whatever it is, but they struggle every single day. Every single day is like leaving your phone be home for them.
You are both very brave. Everyone that has come on that I've talked to, I tell them that. And sometimes I think people are like, you're just saying, I'm not just saying that. You are. To be able to sit down and write your daughter's obituary. And in a way, you probably avoided a lot of uncomfortable situations.
Yeah,
people can be nosy.
I believe that. When I was writing her eulogy, I was getting death threats from the horrible deplorables. So it has definitely, being honest, has diffused, because one of the drug dealers is like, well, if you don't tell us, if you don't let us at the funeral, we're going to burn down your house. And I'm like, go ahead. It's all brick and it's fully insured. I don't care. I have a daughter in heaven and a son here. So I'm a winner either way. I am not intimidated by you.
Wow. She's so awesome. You're a baddie.
Yeah.
You are.
You know what? They can intimidate my 21-year-old daughter, but at my age, they are not even getting close to intimidating me. If they think for 1 second anything, I still get text messages from a couple of them. I put zero merit on anything they say to me. Right? I used to tell Siena, I said, sometimes the best reaction is no reaction, because then they have no idea what you think. Mm-hmm. It's like they don't know if they hurt your feelings. They don't know if you're like a big, get out of my face kind of thing. But they don't know how you feel about it at the other end.
It's hard to get to a place to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. It is very...
Age comes with that.
Thank you. Yeah. And I'm there. I'm definitely there. There's 2 sides to every story, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes there's 3 sides or 4 sides. There's multiple sides to every story. And we all perceive things differently based off of our experiences and where we're at right now in this moment. But I do think that I feel like there's like a shift happening, and we definitely need to keep the conversation going. Yours says stop the judgment, start the conversation. I've been saying that. That's kind of in the intro of the podcast, is keep the conversation going. We have to keep talking about it. I don't want this season to come out and then be like, okay, we're on to the next. Like, yeah, we're going to be on to the next. Yep. But I want to keep this conversation going.
Absolutely. Anyone out there struggling with addiction, we see you, we hear you. Anyone that loves anyone with substance use and mental health, we for sure see you and feel your pain, and know that you are not alone. There are people that care, and we are here at Stop the Judgement Project trying to make as many changes as we possibly can, as fast as we possibly can. I would also like to thank the Butler Eagle for seeing that this podcast is necessary. And I for sure would like to thank you and the Alter Ego podcast for having us.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you, Laura.
You're so welcome. It was such a pleasure having you both. This episode is brought to you by Butler County District Attorney Richard A. Golding, R.W. McDonald & Sons Incorporated, Robert Stevens Jewelers. Thank you to our sponsors for your support on our first season of the Alter Ego podcast. Be sure to click the link in bio for your discount for BetterHelp Therapy online. 10% off your first month. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Alter Ego. Join me every Monday for a new episode on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all podcast platforms, as well as YouTube. Next week, I sit down with Dawn from Glade Run Lutheran Services and Amy from the Suicide Coalition here in Butler County. Another wonderful, informative episode you won't want to miss. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode and follow us on Instagram at Alter Ego Podcast. Until next time, stay safe, stay hopeful, stay kind.